What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Toma Todito Boxing Show. And I want to touch base with you guys as to two boxers that I feel have been somewhat overlooked. For those that are hardcore fans, you guys have been keeping track. I know for sure you guys have been keeping track, and you know that these two fighters have been doing some big things. The two fighters that I'm going to cover on today's show, in their own right, in their own respective right, in their respective careers. These are two fighters that were well known, that were at the top of their class. And the first one that we're going to talk about, both of these fighters were actually active not that long ago, just weeks apart from one another, and just weeks ago. The first fighter I want to talk about is Angelo Leo. You guys have heard me cover Angelo Leo on this podcast before, and he just came away with another victory. Earlier in April, he ended up fighting El Fantástico Eduardo Baez. And if you remember Eduardo Baez, he's been in there with a lot of talent. He's actually shared a ring with Vaquero Navarrete when he challenged for the title and came up short in that attempt. But Eduardo Baez, El Fantástico, he's got a twin brother who's also a professional boxer. Eduardo Baez is an all-action, come-forward type fighter, and this is exactly what he did with Angelo Leo. He just took the fight to him, and it was just power punches galore, and it was to see who was gonna withstand the other's power. Angelo Leo ended up mixing his attack very well, like we talked about in the last fight where he faced Mike Plania and stopped him in the third round. His body attack, the way that he mixes his attack and the way that he attacks that body, he just eliminates the legs from his opponents. That was the case here. It looked for numerous rounds down the stretch where Angelo Leo was going to pull off the upset and the stoppage of Eduardo Baez. But Baez, too much heart, too much spirit, came forward and landed some big bombs throughout the night on Angelo Leo. Eduardo Baez, like I said, he has losses to Arnold Kegai, Vaquero Navarrete, Jonathan Lopez, victories over Enrique Vivas, shared a ring with Rais Salim as well, where he lost a majority decision on that attempt, and now has a unanimous decision loss to Angelo Leo. Eduardo Baez, 23-6-2 overall with 9 knockouts to his credit, came up short against Angelo Leo. But we talk about Angelo Leo, and the reason that I'm keeping track of him is because Angelo Leo, as it stands right now, he improved to 24-1 with 11 knockouts to his credit. That one defeat came at the hands of Cool Boy Steph, Stephen Fulton, at 122 pounds. Remember, Stephen Fulton that was the first title that he got around his hands, and then the second one he got when he unified against Brandon Figueroa. Both titles he lost to Naoya Inoue, when Naoya Inoue became undisputed of that division. That's who Angelo Leo lost to. Since that defeat in 2021 to Steph Fulton, to Cool Boy Steph, that was January of 21. That was a unanimous decision loss for Angelo Leo. Since then, he is on a 4-0 win streak. He beat Aaron Alameda by majority decision, who had a really good record himself going into that fight at 25-1. He then moves up to 126 pounds. Angelo Leo takes his talents to 126, defeats Nicolas Polanco, stops him in the 9th round, beats Mike Plania, who you just heard me mention, stops him in the 3rd round. That was in January of this year. And then a few weeks ago, he's back in the ring, in action, against another tough fighter in Eduardo Baez, and pulls off the unanimous decision win. 4-0 since relinquishing his title to Cool Boy Steph, and he now has a version of the WBA title at 126 and knocking on the door of Raymond Ford. Ray Ford, of course, has a date coming up against Nick Ball. Nick Ball, the mini-sized fighter, the mini-sized power puncher from England, who just came away with a split decision draw against the WBC champion Ray Vargas. So that 126-pound division, very, very active. Nick Ball comes away with a draw when he attempts to take the title from Ray Vargas. Title doesn't change hands. Ray Vargas is still one of the champs at 126. Nick Ball is now moving on to challenge Ray Ford. for the WBA strap. If Ray Ford is successful, Angelo Leo's knocking on the door, and he has a version, a small version of the WBA. With this victory over Eduardo Baez, Angelo Leo became the Continental North American WBA champ. So that's basically getting him in line for the full version title. Should Raymond Ford be successful over Nick Ball? That's going to be an amazing, amazing fight. Both pint-sized fighters. Very interesting fight between Nick Ball and Ray Ford. Angelo Leo is calling for Venado Lopez, who's another one of the champions. And one of the most solid champions, in my opinion, at 126 pounds. That would be another amazing fight, Venado Lopez against Angelo Leo. Brandon Figueroa is going to be, he's the interim WBC champ. He's going to be in action on the undercard of the Canelo Munguia pay-per-view. Ray Vargas, like we said, he retained his title with a draw with Nick Ball. And who is the other champion in that division? I feel like I'm missing one. And let me look it up here. There's one champion that I'm missing, and I don't know why I'm forgetting him. So the other champion would be, Rafa Espinosa. Rafa Espinosa, who had that amazing victory, and he's still enjoying the fruits of his labor and his victory over Robeisy Ramirez last December. Has been all over social media and doing the rounds on interviews and shows, and is still living off the hype and not the hype, but the excitement of that victory, the majority decision victory in what was a total barn burner between him and Robeisy Ramirez in December. So he ended up lifting the title from Robeisy Ramirez. He's the other champion at 126 pounds. And so Angelo Leo's lined up. Angelo Leo's exciting. He mixes his attacks very well, and he is at the best point of his career right now. He hasn't lost a step. Maybe against Alameda, coming off of that loss to Boy Steph, where he had some questions to be answered and had to get back into his rhythm, found his rhythm during that fight, came away with the decision on there, and has since been steamrolling opposition. So Angelo Leo, keep an eye on him. He's an awesome fighter to pay attention to, because he's a fun fighter to watch. He loves to go after the body. He loves to eliminate his opponent's legs, and that's what he did to Eduardo Baez, and has really good power where he puts his combinations well together, sends punches down range, looping punches to the head, and all that rhythm ends up leading him and taking him right back to his body attack. And the body is where he finds most of his success. Very unique, because he's not your traditional headhunter. Out of Albuquerque, exciting fighter. And like I said, he's got only one defeat, and that's at the hands of Boy Steph, and it was a decision loss. So to date, El Chinito, Angelo Leo, that's his nickname, El Chinito, out of Albuquerque, out of Vegas at times. I think he was training out of Vegas as well. But to date, 24-1, 11 knockouts, fun fighter. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, go do some research. Angelo Leo's probably going to become one of your favorite fighters. The other fighter I want to cover today is Nicholas Walters. Do you guys remember that name, Nicholas Walters? The Axeman? If you don't remember Nicholas Walters was in there with some amazing talent when he was at the peak of his career in the mid-2010s. Nicholas Walters has victories over Victor Chinian, picked Nonito Donaire apart, was at the top of his game when he picked Nonito Donaire apart at the StubHub Center, if I recall correctly. Those are fights that took place in the mid-2010s, like I said. Had a crazy fight with Dallas Prescott and stopped him in the 7th round. Knocked out Victor Chinian in the 5th. Stopped Nonito Donaire in the 6th. Went on to lose his title on the scales when he faced off against then undefeated Miguel Marriaga, who was just a menace back in 2015. Marriaga was at the top of his game. 20-0 when he stepped in the ring against the Axeman. That was the best fight at that time. And at that time, these fights were taking place in the very same division that we were just talking about with Angelo Leo at 126 pounds. These featherweights were at the top of their game, and Nicholas Walters was dominating anybody and everybody in that division. Well, he loses his title on the scale when he faces off against Miguel Marriaga. And on that night, Marriaga was the only one that had the chance, should he be successful, to come away with the title. Something similar to what we just saw with Haney and Garcia. Walters misses weight, comes in heavy, loses the title on the scale, and goes on to hand the first defeat of Marriaga's career, defeats him by unanimous decision, drops Marriaga in the 9th round of that fight, and comes away with the win. Lost the title on the scales, but still came away with the win. And remained undefeated himself. Because of that weight loss, or that having lost the title on the scales, and that weight gain, I should say, he ended up taking his talents to the 130-pound division, Nicholas Walters did. He faced off against Jason Sosa. And that was a crazy back and forth fight. It was a scoring nightmare where both fighters took the fight to one another. Nicholas Walters and Jason Sosa fought to a majority decision draw in their 10-round fight. And that was the welcoming for Nicholas Walters into the 130-pound division. In the very next fight, he steps into the ring against Vasyl Lomachenko and challenges him for the WBO title. This is at 130 pounds now. This is 2016. November of 2016. Nicholas Walters, who was a monster, who the curiosity lied to see whether his power was going to potentially stop or derail Vasyl Lomachenko, who was only 6-1 at that time. And Vasyl Lomachenko picked Nicholas Walters apart, embarrassed him. So much so that the fight ends up being called off in the 7th round, and we never hear from Nicholas Walters again. He steps away from the ring. If he retired, maybe it was in some obscure newspaper article. But he disappeared. Disappeared from the sport. Nobody would hear from him. Stepped away completely. November 26th of 2016, where he was humbled, embarrassed, humiliated by the Matrix, Vasyl Lomachenko. Nicholas Walters satisfies the itch that for sure remained after having dominated for so long in the sport of boxing and then getting picked apart by Vasyl Lomachenko. He didn't want anything to do with the sport. But that itch had to have stayed in there to see if he could still compete, if he still had something left, and it just happened to be a bad night for him against one of the elites of the sport. 7 years later, which puts us at February of last year, 2023, Nicholas Walters steps back into the ring. No longer at 130 pounds, but he stepped in at 140 pounds. Against an unknown fighter goes to Colombia to fight a gentleman by the name of Luis Marmol, who had a 19-16 record. But this was just to get his feet wet, just to get rid of the rust, just to see if he still had it. Comes in at 140 pounds, a weight that he had never fought at or competed at before, and came away with the unanimous decision win in an 8-round fight against Luis Marmol. He stays in Colombia, or at least returns to Colombia to compete. Again in 2023, just a few months ago. November 22nd of this past year, he steps back into the ring and fights at a catch weight against another unknown fighter, but this was also same thing, just continue getting some rounds under him. But he now comes in at 148 pounds, where his opponent, by the name of Reynaldo Esquivia, with a 9-21 record, came in at 153 pounds. Nicholas Walters had never fought this heavy, had never fought at 140 pounds. Only 2 fights at 130. One was a draw, and one was his humiliation against Vasyl Lomachenko. Returns at 140, then goes up 8 pounds at 148 in a second return fight, and fights a fighter at super welterweight at 153 pounds. And he stops him in the second round. He got rid of the rust in these 2 fights and found his power back. Power that he used to possess at 126 pounds when he was at the top of the game. Power that transitioned against the super welterweight this past November. And an experienced fighter, of course. I just told you his record, 9-21. But nonetheless, the power is back. He's getting his groove back. 2 victories under his belt, and he stepped into the ring late March of this year against the well-known, battle-tested Joseph Adorno. You've heard of Joseph Adorno. He's been in there with some decent names. Joseph Adorno, young fighter, fast feet, fast hands, good combination puncher. Has shared the ring with Edwin de los Santos, with Elvis Rodriguez, with Michel Rivera, Jermaine Ortiz, Hugo Roldan. Joseph Adorno is a tough matchup. Not a gatekeeper, but he's a tough matchup for anybody because he's still finding his groove. He is young, not just in age, but in his career. He came into the ring with an 18-3 record, with 2 draws, 15 knockouts, to his credit of the 18 victories. This was going to be a tough test for Nicholas Walters. Walters, after these 2 fights that he returned, I just told you, at 140 and then 148, he finally got his weight on check at the worst time possible, because he ended up putting himself in check during the holiday season, during Christmas holidays and Thanksgiving holidays and New Year's. Worst time for him to get himself back in shape. But that just proves that Nicholas Walters is going to make a serious run again, and this time at the lightweight division. He checked his weight and fought Joseph Adorno in the lightweight division at 135 pounds. In a 10-round fight, Walters came in at 133.5. Adorno came in at 134. Walters is very serious about his comeback. And the Axeman, if he's able to put a couple victories together at 135 pounds, now that he's starting to find his groove back, and he looked very good against Joseph Adorno, the question here was a legit opponent with legit power, who's a bigger body, bigger puncher than Nicholas Walters. Was he going to be able to withstand the onslaught of Joseph Adorno? And he did. He answered the call. He's in there against heavier punchers. And if he's going to make a serious run at 135 pounds, you're looking at Edwin de los Santos. And you're looking at Shakur Stevenson and William Zepeda. So he needs a couple fights under him. Abdullah Mason, Emiliano Vargas, Alan Garcia, Kid Kansas. If Nicholas Walters is going to make a serious run, this is as loud of a message as he could have sent to the lightweight division by getting a solid victory over a solid opponent in Joseph Adorno. He got the unanimous decision win in their 10-round event, or their 10-round fight. And the Axeman, as far as we could see, as of this moment, is back. Has answered the doubts, the demons in his head, has put 3 wins together. One of those legit, which is this one we're talking about against Joseph Adorno. And he now sits at 29 victories, 1 defeat to Lomachenko, 1 draw to Sosa, or with Sosa. Of those 29 victories, 22 by KO. And the man, the Axeman, out of Jamaica, has announced his arrival to the lightweight division. I'm very, very interested to see who he's paired up against. Hopefully as another notable name, another up-and-coming prospect or maybe contender. Maybe someone in the top 20, top 15. And should he be victorious then, we could really start making noise about Nicholas Walters being another top dog after having been gone from the ring for 7+ years. So exciting. And most people are ignoring this, or maybe overlooking it, or maybe not aware. But these are 2 fighters that you should keep an eye out for in Angelo Leo at 126 pounds, and now Nicholas Walters, who is campaigning at 135 pounds. And yes, Vasyl Lomachenko is a lightweight now. If he gets a couple victories under his belt, maybe that's the reason why he's campaigning at 135, and he's going to go try to run it back and erase those memories, or try to right that wrong against Vasyl Lomachenko, who is on the back end of his career. Nonetheless, challenging for the IBF title in a couple weeks' time against George Kambosos. So I'll leave you guys with that. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Keep an eye out for Nicholas Walters. Keep an eye out for Angelo Leo. And a lot more episodes coming your way. Take care of yourself. Have a great night. And I'll catch you on the next episode. Take care.